So we can start to prepare the basic scene we need to work to make the simulation. I will try to make a model really simple. So we try to focus to have, for example, a logo, a text logo. So let's go in the customize and again unit setup. And this time we can work directly with the generic units. We don't need to work in the metric system. So we go to create a text in the front view. And we'll try to work on something simple. So let's go for writing, for example, the day word. And then we can create another text. And let's call it origin, the origin. So I like to do something that will be 300 units of scaling. So we are talking about 300, and it's nice. So this one can be can use a different font. We have to find something that maybe can be an app, but obviously you can use whatever else, it's not a problem. So let's go just to see if we can have something simple but nice to see. Let's see, for example, let's go for something else. For example, we can try with the humanist. You should have something like that, or maybe another one. And the text can be more little, and we can go for a bold character, or maybe with the normal one. Okay. So we go to have something like that. A simple logo, and we go to move it there. Okay, we can create the 3D meshes, and we go to pick maybe just this one, and we go to have the bevel. Let's go at full screen, and we go to have the first 8. Let's try with 13, and then the second one maybe just a little bit, and then we go to have the minus value to have, you see, the bevel there. We can do the same with this one, so we can copy with the right mouse button, copy, and then select the text and paste. I'm not doing an instance because I like to tune in a different way if needed the text. Okay. So we have our simple text, and now we can remove the grid using the G key. So we have a cleaner version of the scene. So I like to start preparing some particles. We can tune the rendering setup later, it's not a problem. So we can start to prepare the first particle. We'll use particle flow for all particle system. Then we'll use Krakatoa to generate the rendering setup and all the other particles. But the first thing we do before having a particle system, we go to create a camera. Let's go to have a target camera. Maybe we can tweak something like that. And let's work with just cameras object about the selection. And this one will be the cameras. So you see we are really near the object. Maybe we can go a little bit more distant, and let's go to have maybe 250 or maybe 300 frames. Okay, and let's start animating the sequence. So I like to stay maybe for 150 frames inside the the logo, so 150, and we go inside, as you see, and then we can start to change. But before, I like to set a key, set a key, and then we can go at the end, and the final position will be, let's move to something like that, and then this one will be to the center, and then back there, and we go to see the entire text, and something like that. So I like to see how it looks, the animation, then we tweak a little bit the camera curves, and then we start to work and play with the particle. So let's go back to see the animation. You see that we are moving inside the logo, and then we are starting to come out, and we see it from the out area, and then we go and we have the final position. I think it can be enough. So maybe we can do just some adjustment. So maybe we can start to move this one before. So we go in the track view, and we can anticipate this curve. Let's say maybe at 150 now, so let's try with 120, and again we can see maybe before. Let's try before. Okay, let's try now. So we are starting to move, and then we are going down. Okay, it should be nice. So let's close, remove the auto key, and I like to set the resolution to HD TV. Close, and then there show save frame, so we have the framing for our animation, and save. Okay, now we can pick the let's create another view. Okay, maybe this one can be a little bit more little. That's the camera. Let's go to have the show save frame and the shaded, and this one, just one, can be, let's go for an extended, and we go for the Scene Explorer and new, and we have the possibility to access to the various tool and objects from there. So we created the first particle. Let's call it PF layer 001. Okay, and save. Nice. So this one will be the first one, and we go to create something simple, but that can be used and be really nice to be animated. So I like to say that we are using something like a big sphere around our object. So we go to create a sphere, and this one will be the particle emitter. Okay, and we go to change a little bit the shape, and same on the other area, and just a little bit bigger there. We can align to the text. Let's see, center, and this will be fine. Okay, this object will be, let's call it outer sphere. Right mouse button, object properties, let's say not renderable, display as box. Okay, so we have just a box proxy around our mesh. So now we can select the particles, go in the particle view, and let's scale a little bit and scale also there. Okay, set to on. And the first thing we need is a position object. So let's go to pick the position object, and we can cover the position icon. Then we select this one, and you see that the particles are burning from the sphere, but are just going down. So we have to say to use something else, and I like to say that the particles are just burning there, and we have no speed for the moment. So we have the particles emitted at 0 and 0. So you see we have the particles all over the sphere surface. Let's say to see 100% particles inside the viewport in the emission from the PF selection. And I like to do something else. So I like to work with the volume. So I like to have the particles inside the volume. So we have to say location is not the surface, but it's the volume. So now the particles are inside the sphere. And I like to put the particles just where we have a nice kind of texture. And to do something like that, we need to create a material. So let's go in the material editor. And there we have to create a material for the sphere. So let's use this one. And we need to pick the material from the sphere we are using, and we have to prepare a texture, and we go for a noise. So we can create a chaotic position for the particles. Let's go for noise, and here we have to tune the texture, and I like to create a turbulence to you see, to create just some area with the particles. And then we need for sure a bigger scale because the object is really big. I like to have a little bit more complexity on the noise. And then we have to tune a little bit the height and the low, and also the color. So let's swap the color, and then we go for maybe 005 there, and let's say 012. So you see we have some nice noise turbulence over the texture. Then we have just to go there and say to use the density by material. So you see that it's putting the particles just in some areas. If we go to use more particles, it will be visible. Obviously it's really slow, so let's go to points. But you see that it's creating a turbulent network of particles. Let's save. So then I like to do something more, and I mean I like to prepare a little bit of speed. Actually the particles are not moving, so if you see the particles are sticking to the volume. But before I like to use, let's select text 1 and text 2, and then object properties, let's say not renderable for the moment, and display, maybe we can use the see-through. Okay, so back there, if we set the speed, obviously it takes a little bit, you see that the particles are moving and falling down. I like to change and to use the random 3D, so you see that the particles are moving all around. But I like to go inside, so let's wait. So we can see, for example, minus 0.5, just to have a little bit of speed moving forward, and there we can use, for example, 0.1 for the variation. And if we go to see now, you see that the particles are moving in a chaotic way, just a little bit, moving on the inside the volume, so they are not going away. Nice. We don't need the rotation, so right mouse button, delete. Let's say for the moment to show maybe just 10% of the particles we are using. So we have a different way to tune the particles and it will be faster. Then I like to create something to make it moving, and we can have, for example, the find target. So I like that these particles we go to stick and to take the place and the shape of the text. To do something like that, we have first of all to pick the text one, and we can have an edit poly, and then we attach to the second mesh. So attach, and we can select the text number 2, pick. So we have just one text now. Okay, let's go to use a find target. Let's put it there. And in the find target, we like to find the text. So we say to use a mesh object, select by list, text. If we go to see, you see that the particles are moving. Let's go back to the ticks to see in a better way. And I like to have the track update progress. Sorry, the particle count. It is faster, so let's remove. Okay, so you see we have the particles moving inside the various event. Okay, so I like to find the object, and when we find the object, we can use the lock to stitch it to the mesh. You can use, if you have not a stitch, you can set the speed to 0. So let's go there and let's select the lock and bond. Okay, the lock and bond is useful because it can lock particles to a given mesh. Let's connect. It takes just a little bit. And then we have to say that the particles will lock over the text. Okay, so you see that what is happening is that the particles are moving and attaching to the mesh. Now we have to tune the parameters of the find target. So we are controlling the speed, and we need a target point, but I like to stay more near. So the test is true when we are the distance between the particles and the target point over the mesh is less than 0.2. The speed is really high, so let's go lower. We'll use maybe 15, and we like to have a variation, so maybe 5. The acceleration is too high because you see that the particles are starting too fast, so we go to have a low acceleration. And now if we go to see, you see that the particles start slow and then start to move and stitching to the mesh. And now we have to tweak a little bit also the other parameters. So this is happening because we have not so much speed. So let's go to see. First of all, let's finalize the find target setup. So we go for the closest to face, so the particle will stitch on the closest point to the same particles. Let's go to see, you see that it's moving and attaching, and then now are still moving around. I think we have to tune again back the at least less than to 1. Okay, and now it is working nice. Perfect. So we are shaping the logo shape using this particle layer, and we have just locked the particles to to the shape there. If you like, you can add, if you have, for example, a wind to generate some chaos to the movement, or you can leave with this value and that's all. So it will be really simple. Let's say, but I like to show you what is happening with a lot of particles. So back in the particle view, we can go inside there and set 2 dots, and then we say to have, let's say, 10,000 particles. It takes a little bit to shape, maybe we can go higher. Let's try to have a really high value as 50,000. It takes a little bit to generate the particles, you see, and then we can see how it is moving. But before we go inside there, and we say dots also for the event 2, so the particles when go to be locked over the surface will be dots. If we go to see, you see that the particles are stitching to the surface and generating the logo. Okay, nice. Actually, we are seeing just the 10% particles. So if we go, for example, to 50% particles, now it takes a little bit to generate the particles, but then we can see a really dense value. Obviously, you have to remember that with Krakatoa we'll create more and more particles, so this path is really not so complex. Okay, you see that in this way we have the possibility to see better the noise structure we just created, and then you see that the particles are stitching all together, and that's the noise. Obviously, to change the structure, you have to change this noise, for example, the scaling, or for example, the levels, or the high and the low, to generate more black area. Okay, shape. Let's set to off this particle, and we can go to work on another particle system, and this time we'll create something different, and it will be useful to manage some additional effect. This will be something like general dust moving and shaping the particles. To generate this one, we are going to create a new particle system. So right mouse button on in the over the sheet, and then we can create particle system, a standard flow. Right mouse button, rename, and we call it PF layer 002. Let's focus on the second one. Okay, so we like to have those particles burning at the first frame, and we say to use again the position object, so we can copy directly this one, copy, and then paste, and let's remove the position icon, right mouse button, delete. So now the particles are set with the same value as before, but this time I'm taking care about doing something different. And I mean, we go to create a copy of the sphere, so using the scaling and going there and using the shift key, we go to use something like that. Let's make a copy and move it there. Okay, and this one will be the little. Okay, nice. So now we say to this one to remove the outer sphere and to use the outer little. Okay, so you see it is using this one, and we go to create another material. So let's assign this one. In there we can set again a noise, and this one will be similar to the previous one, so we can just copy this one, paste as a copy, discard the old map, and then we set a different scaling. So we go to have something more little, like 10. Okay, so now the particles are using the volume, the density by material, and we can say delete particles if the location is wrong. So if one particle is created in a wrong position, it will be erased. So we'll have just right particles that are working in the right way. Now I like to tune also the setting there. So we go to have the particles over the surface. Let's say to have more particles, 2000. And we say to have particles with an offset. So the particles will be outer the surface and inner the surface. We say that the minimum is maybe 50 and the maximum is maybe 60. So we are talking about particles that stay out of the surface. So then we are going to make something after a while. So we remove the speed, right mouse button delete, and we remove the rotation, right mouse button delete. Now we use an age test to decide that after some frames something happened. Let's move this one on the right side, and we say that when the particles have, for example, 45 frames for age and 5 of variation, so we have particles between 40 and 50. So we say that after a while we use again a find target. So the first thing we can do is to go there and use find target. So after some frames we use a find target to find the text. So we go there and we say mesh by list and we go for the text. So if we go to see the animation, you see that the particle stays with no animation, and then after a while they start to move to find the text mesh. We have to tune a little bit the parameters. So we say that we have the speed, but we have less speed. We have an higher variation. Let's try with 45. We have again too much acceleration, so let's go for a lower value as 35. And then we have again there the position of the particles over the given mesh will be the closest surface. So let's see what happens. You see that the particles are stopped, then start to move, and they go to stitch over. But obviously now we have no stitching because we have no stick, no lock. So we go to have again a lock. So go to copy this one, copy, and we can make an instance, right mouse button instance, because we use the same values, and lock. So we go to see the animation, they are moving, and then stitching. Perfect. Let's go to have dots, dots, and dots. Nice. So another thing we like to do is to change a little bit the animation of the particles moving. So we can use, for example, the random walk, or if you have no the random walk, you can use a force using a wind with a noise. Let's copy the random walk there, and then we tweak a little bit the values to have a nice animation. We go to have a low speed with a high variation, so let's say 45%, and the noise size is low with a low scaling, let's say 2. If we go to check the animation now, you see that the particles, but let's use more particles. Okay, you see that the particles are moving, but it seems that we have no animation. So we go to have something different, and we say that we have a higher viscosity to have more noise. So it will be more visible the the disturbance, the turbulence over the animation. So let's go for 300% of viscosity, and we'll have obviously a variation in the viscosity too. Let's say maybe 50%. Let's go to see the animation, and it is going to have a little bit of chaos. Another thing I like to do is to change the emitter start. Let's say that we have particles before the beginning, so -20 and -20, so we have the particles that are moved about the curation, so the particles are also visible before. Let's go back there to have a nicer color to see better the particles. And in the position, in the position, let's go to tweak a little bit. Let's say maybe, so you see we have more strange shape. And if needed, we can have also a little bit of random chaos also there. So let's go to have a random walk, and there we set a low speed with a variation, and the noise side is low obviously, and we have a really high viscosity. Let's try with 900, and the variation is 50%. If we go to see, you see that the particles are moving in a aquatic way and then start to go there. I like to have a nicer color with a clear visibility, so let's go for something like that, and the same there. And just to see how it is looking. So you see there we have the particles. Let's see how it is moving. We have general chaos, and then we have particles moving in this way, and I like to see if we have an higher viscosity. Let's try with 800. Let's see what happens. Okay, it is obviously too much because we have no moving particles. Let's try with 350. Okay, they are moving and some particles are stitching still there. And we can have an higher speed there. Let's try with 300. So let's go to change more. Maybe with more acceleration. Okay, you see that in this way we have the right time to do it. Maybe this time now it is too much. Let's try with 70. Okay, we can try to have less. Let's try with 55. Okay, maybe just a little bit to be sure that we have all particles stitching together, so maybe 58 or maybe 60, so we are sure we have everything. Okay. Okay, so we have the particles stitching. Nice. So this one is ready. We can try to see what happens if we have more particles. Let's say that we see 50% particles. Now it takes a little bit to generate. We have the particles, and then we go there, and maybe we can have no random walk for the moment to have less chaos, and set to on also this one. It takes a little bit to generate. Okay, and close. Sorry, let's wait. So we have it. You see that we are starting to have a lot of particles. And let's go to save. Now if we go to see what happened, maybe just on one view, you see that we have a lot of particles around the scene, and then everything is moving and stitching together. Maybe we can anticipate a little bit the camera animation. So let's go in the curve editor, and let's say that, sorry, let's select the camera. So we have this animation there. Let's say maybe 110, and that's all. Let's see if it is better. So we can see more particles from the outer. Okay, you see that we see still particles forming. Okay, and that's all. Okay, nice. We can have maybe 50 frames more. So we should be able to have everything working in the right way. Okay, moving and particles forming. Okay, perfect. So let's save and move. Now we can move to the next part. In the next part, we'll create more passes, still 2 more passes, and then we start to prepare the rendering process with Krakatoa and tune with Magmaflow some properties about the particles.